Hi, family. Chris Denson is our guest today, and I'm really excited about it because Chris is an award-winning innovation advocate. Now, he's also a marketer, host, and humor-inspired content creator. And the thing about Chris is that his humor is infused in some of the most technologically and from a business perspective, developmentally sound place. As both a storyteller and a practitioner, Chris is an expert at uncovering unique business insights. You see, Chris works in cultural touch points, technological applications, imaginative thinking, and emotional intelligence. Often that intelligence that is required to bring groundbreaking ideas to life. He actually leads innovation at his current organization, MullenLowe, and he's going to talk with us about what being a U.S. director in that capacity really means. Here's the thing. Chris authored the 2018 Amazon #1 bestseller called Crushing the Box: 10 Essential Rules for Breaking Essential Rules. I strongly advocate that you get that book, you enjoy it. I love to get books on Kindle, but in Chris's case, I just had to get paper as well to mark it up and play back and forth with it. Maybe because I'm not as technologically savvy to be able to do that on my Kindle. But regardless, just chatting with Chris is a joy in itself. Actually listening and learning from him, well, that's a gift to oneself. So enjoy this conversation with my friend, Chris Denson. So family, I got him. Here's Chris. Hey, Chris, they've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you. How you doing?
I'm good. I've been waiting for you. So I'm just trying to keep up.
Well, look, you're on the other side of this conversation today because I really enjoyed, and I have to say of the podcasts I've done, I really enjoyed yours. You always bring out such great conversation from places I didn't even think I'd be talking from. I get you today. Before we jump into all the good stuff, can you just tell us some of the stuff you're engaged in right now? I mean, the list is long, but we're here to listen.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I have a new puppy named Fiona, which I will send you a picture of later. But I've been hosting Fast Company's The Work in Progress, a series exploring bridging equity gaps across all sorts of socioeconomic divides. I've been the director and SVP of innovation at MullenLowe for the first one in their 50-year history. So helping stand up an innovation practice from scratch inside of an award-winning media agency. And I'm also developing a martial arts action comedy series. So, you know, it's a little left brain, right brain kind of stuff going on, but it's fun. It's every day is fun.
Talk a little bit more about MullenLowe, though, because, you know, some of our family aren't really familiar if they're not working in that area, but they certainly will be interested.
Yeah, no, MullenLowe is like a global agency founded in Boston literally 50 years ago. I think they just celebrated the 50th anniversary. I started in November of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic and just kind of like haven't met a soul there in real life, but I've met their souls, if you know what I mean. So it's been a great experience. Clients range from Burger King to Whole Foods to Navy Federal Bank to, it's just a wide Microsoft is another client. So it's a pretty wide range of organizations we get to engage with on a day-to-day and think really creatively for them. The bread and butter of the agency has been advertising, media, social, digital, production, like the whole nine. And so injecting real innovation as a muscle to flex inside of the organization has been an interesting task in the past few months.
Yeah, so you lead innovation. What does that mean at MullenLowe?
I don't know. No, no. Innovation is one of those kind of like ubiquitous words, right? It means different things to different people. I look at it as an operating system, right? Like how do we continue to push ourselves forward? You and I have talked about this before. The concept of like what got you here won't get you there. And then in the middle of that is where that ingenuity, that creative thinking, that undoing of certain great lessons you've learned along the way in order to learn new lessons and to do new things. So, you know, it's an agency that was already doing well. They hold the record of Effies won every year, you know, which is, you know, the Oscars of the PR world. And so they already do a great job. And so that's the fun task to me, is like, how do we take this to another level? And it's, you know, it's introducing startup culture, is kind of finding new and different resources, different ways of doing things, and participating in brainstorms, and just like from the bottom of the ladder to the top of it, just kind of like, where can I inject myself and be of value and help increase potential?
So I wasn't going to go here, but I got to ask this question, because basically it sounds like you get to kick the roof off. So here's the thing, Chris, when you talk about what innovation means at MullenLowe and how you perform to it, how you lead to it, then a lot of what people don't know becomes a part of the known kit, right? It's like it's like the gap in it. We find ourselves in a place today, we collectively, meaning people of the world, find ourselves in a place today where a lot of stuff wasn't known, and innovation occurred quite rapidly, or at least got enhanced around when you think that 18 months ago, we didn't have vaccinations. We think they work. We don't know in 8 months, you know, but I mean, that's a collective lot of work together people had to do. When you think about innovation and those brands that you mentioned that touch all of us, or we touch them, how do you keep your human part of it being so valuable? Because we're all thinking algorithms and technology are thinking quicker, better, faster than us. So how do you play with that?
When you talk about like the last 18 months, I'm getting goosebumps actually, because one of the things I talk about the most when I talk about innovation pre-COVID was like the idea of empathy. You know, if you're going to create anything for anybody, you damn sure better understand what it's like to be in that person's shoes, and that customer of one, right? And so how deep are we willing to do? It was easy when we had the data and we could go sit in the meeting and talk and blah, 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 and we're problem solving for these individuals. What happened was the playing field just got completely demolished, not even like leveled, it was demolished. And so usually we come from this place like of security, and I know what's going on, and maybe this idea will work, maybe it won't, you know, and of course there's very passionate and smart people in that line of thought. But, you know, when we're, and usually the couple that with the fact that when you go through something in life, it's very isolating. You know, whether you lost your job or a family member passed or whatever, whatever downsides life can bring us. And I think this is the first time in our history that we've all experienced the same thing at the same time. So I know what I had was a lot of honest conversations with individuals I knew well and people I had, you know, met for the first time. Just very, very honest conversations. And I think when you come to that, when you come from that place creatively in a problem-solving environment, like that's just raw and real. And so people are willing to like let you into their vulnerabilities, what we don't know, what, you know, what we can't figure it out. It was a period of like really in-depth honesty. And I think that led to a lot of really creative solutions, because we were just all kind of in it together, as opposed to like client services relationship or entrepreneur, sale, you know, investor. It was just like, okay, oh, we need a fix. Right. And we also don't know if that fix will stick. So I feel like it just really ripened the environment for you know, the type of innovation that you're talking about. Right.
Let's talk about this time that we're all solving for the same solution at the same time, no matter where you are in the world. There's nobody, even an infant, who's not been impacted, you know, more than 2 degrees away by COVID. Let's suggest that we can have 3 buckets of conversation. One is around health, COVID. Mm-hmm. One is around, and that really helped frame that we were in a pandemic. The second bucket is around finance, economics. Mm-hmm. And the third bucket is around race. how do we look at that? And how do these all converge in this moment to help us toward better innovation? Now, if we need to, we can talk about, some of the history of this stuff, or even just the history as it applies to your adulthood, if we're
Yeah.
not going all the way back, okay? But how do we do this, Chris?
Yeah.
How do we get to the point that we discuss it toward innovating to a better future?
Yeah, I mean, somebody once said to me, who thought a sneeze in China would affect, you sitting here in Los Angeles, right? Like something as simple as that. And the first word that comes to mind to me is like connectedness. Again, the fact that we all experienced it all at the same time. And, COVID didn't care how much money you had or what neighborhood you lived in. Now, the system was kind of jacked up, and it showed a lot of the cracks in it, very obviously. And then you have that coupled with the fact that the crescendo of Black Lives Matter, and it became a global issue. And usually even myself, like I'm on a plane or I'm traveling somewhere and I have my daily distractions and I'm like, oh, that's too bad. And somebody should do something about that. And then I move on. But the fact that you couldn't escape it, there was no, there was no going to a massage or the gym or anything you used to have to distract you from what is happening around you. And so, and the saying became true. Like if you're not participating in the solution, then you're part of the problem. And, that participation can vary, whether it's like your daily social media post or PayPal, for example, stood up a $535 million fund, which they distributed to, a series of Black entrepreneurs. And so there was a lot of that. And then it just showed other forms of inequality. So, again, we're all exposed and brands move culture forward. Like there's no denying, like the things we see, the way brands try to entice you to spend your money with them, it requires ingenuity. It requires like thoughtful messaging. It requires thoughtful brand acts. It requires so much, and requires like cutting through the clutter with really dope creative. And if you don't do a multitude of things, then you fail. And so whether it was lip service, where someone was like, oh, we stand in solidarity with fill in the blank, or it was like, yo, we got to get out into the streets and do something, like whether it's a baby step or it's a big giant step, I think all those things are required. So, and that becomes, to your other point, like in the health conversation, that's one of probably the second most obviously glaring thing staring in front of us. Is just like, oh, wow, my daughter's mom was in the hospital for 10 days, recently. Like, so, and not that there's a socioeconomic divide, but it is still going on, and we're still facing it. So those are things that you can't escape. And money is at the center of it all. Where money comes from, how it flows. That's why, and I'm just spitballing this now, but, with the rise in digital currency and,
yeah, where's money tomorrow? What does
exactly,
look like
exactly.
tomorrow?
And it democratizes access to capital if certain communities are led in that direction. And like sometimes it's like, oh, if I just crack the door open, you can come on in. But sometimes that door, you don't even know the door exists. So, either I show you the door or I crack it open a little bit and then let you take over. And that's, I don't know, like, so innovation in the midst of all that stuff, again, it's creative problem solving, it's connecting dots. It's how can we kill as many birds with one stone as possible? And what is that stone? Is it a new program? Is it a system? Is it a technology? Is it,
and which birds are we killing? And are we killing for food or killing as prey?
Exactly. Well, you also got to go back to the fact that, again, that idea of empathy. I did a project with the UN and a fintech project during the UN summit a couple of years ago in 2019. And this woman told, her name is Jamila Mahmood. She told a great story. She's the head of partnerships for the Red Cross globally. And they went into some developing part of the world and took this woman shopping. And rather than buying food, this woman actually bought soap and deodorant. And, for her family, because dignity was high on that social group's, priority list. Where if you don't feel dignified, you're not going to go to the job interview or do whatever it is else you need to do. And so we landed on this idea of like, are we solving the right problems? or is everything else a Band-Aid, or is everything else a nice gesture? And so, every innovation starts with what human pain point are we trying to solve? And is it a real pain point? And how deep can we go with that?
And, when my sister Trish came out to California about, well, I won't put the years on it. It's been significant length of time ago, Chris.
Shout out to Trish.
I asked her if she would come out to help me to design for my own workforce and to lead our teams that looked at our clients where we were placing people, right? With the thought that we wouldn't place people in environments, we wouldn't place family who we loved. And she made me make one commitment to her. That commitment was that I would look at these jobs as skill sets and not people, because she said every time she would ask me, and what about so-and-so, and what about this, I put it in a person's name, not in the skill category. Her conversation continued to me that, and she made me commit to her, she'd be able to build out an organization that met the needs of the organization from the operational perspective it needed. And I started to talk about what we all had in common. And back then she said, well, what you're talking about is culture. It can be accommodated into for how you look. But the truth is, when you say use common sense isn't that common anymore. And it's not a downplay of people's intelligence always. Sometimes it can be. Oftentimes it can just be that people have new communities they live in. My children, when I grew up in the community of Tarboro, North Carolina. Okay. Southeastern United States, one of the poorest economies in the country, segregated community, church on Sunday, work all year to get people to register to vote and then hope they can hide so they don't get seen and lose their jobs voting. That was my community. That is not my children's community. And so how we define community gives people, other than geographic, even experiential opportunity to participate. We can basically open up our computers and apps and decide if we want to go to a community, or at minimum ask somebody to invite us to it, and bam, we're there. How does that speak to all the stuff you care so much about, Chris, as you lead innovation in creating innovation that's people friendly?
Yeah, look, I mean, the people friendly part of it is, my starting point is usually curiosity. I'm a nosy person. I will walk into any bar, any conference. Like I went to Tahiti 5 years ago, and in like the off season, and there was some doctors conference there. I was on vacation, and I was like, ooh, I walked in, and I was like, what? I wrote the thing down. I was like looking up stuff. And I think you just have to remain like relentlessly curious about the world, right? And you have to develop it, and then you have to maintain it, because there's a lot that we don't know. We think we know a lot, even at the height of success that you've achieved. It's like you're still like learning and exploring and seeing what's out there, and we assume that at some point we're done, but we're never done. So and I think you couple that with the fact that as human beings, we're naturally problem solvers. So if you look at like the rise of the esports industry and everything surrounding it, right? Nerd culture, all those things. Video games are all about problem solving and the endorphins that get released when you achieve a new level or you do a new task. That's why it works. At the bottom line, there's communities that are developed around it, right? Because we can work together as a clan, and and be the best and beat the game at this level. It just really speaks to what humanity is. And so there's a reason, like you get your best folks in a brainstorm room and go like, all right, what can we do? And you're also bringing those people's diverse experiences, right? You talk about like how you grew up versus how your kids grew up versus how I grew up in Detroit.
Or my younger sisters and brothers.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Even within the same family. My brother and sister are 12 and 13 years older than me. I was born the year my parents got divorced. So the way I see things is just different. But when we come together and we're trying to like figure something out, it's cool because of that difference. And there's a little, sibling rivalry, as there is in a business. You refer to a lot of your business moves as family, oriented, kind of spirited. I think it's the same thing. It's just like, I got to give you feedback and tell you like, that sucks, or I didn't like that, or whatever it might be, but it's all love and it's all headed in the same direction. So, you talk about just the people-friendly experiences. You just have to remember, like, every day you're dealing with human beings, because most times, like, I had a habit earlier in my career where I would just like get on the phone and be like, all right, what are we talking about? Not like, how are you? Well, where'd you grow up? How are your kids? Now let me get to, not everybody's wired that way. But I learned that like developing rapport gets me far better results than whatever skill sets I have.
Well, Chris, I got to admit, there have been some mornings when I'm thinking and I'm about to send a text to an exec, I have to remember to go back and put good morning in front of it.
I almost every email I write, I go back and humanize it. Hey guys, like exclamation point or a smiley face or insert a joke. Like I probably the simplest email still gets about 2 or 3 edits.
But you know what it does? It does as much for the sender as it does for the person who receives it. It keeps us in touch with not just humanity, but that person's humanness as well, as we're asking or delivering to them.
Yeah, like, I mean, somebody just had a baby and this is their first, they're back to work now, and you're like, where's that file? like, that's not cool. So, it's like, oh, is everything okay? Let me know if you need anything. I've been through it twice, but where's that file, right? Like,
I got your file for you, right?
Right. So
I got your file.
Yeah, I mean, these are like lessons we learn in kindergarten, just how to be good people to one another. And, I think in the middle of, as we get older and our lives get busier and you're at a prime and you got kids and bills and, a water leak and, everything else is going on, you're like, I just need to get through this. And like, we have tunnel vision. But you're right, like it does as much for you to just like be connected, because that's going to come back to you. Right? Like, when you hear those stories about you out in the world, you're like, oh, my friend said he ran into you and you were the coolest person. And I was like, I was feeling shitty that day. Like, there's just so many different things, but just being mindful of how you show up and who you're showing up in front of. And
Chris, how do you talk about the we and the me when you get into innovation? Because I'm going to give you heads up. I really want it. I so look forward to this conversation because I really want you to be able to break innovation principles down for our family so that they can start to create innovation tanks within their own community or themselves as well. And I know you wrote Crushing the Box, 10 Essential Rules for Breaking Essential Rules. I don't know if that's part of this answer. I know it's part of what we're going to talk about. But before we get there, how do you address the we and the me when you approach innovation? Is there person in that? Or is it just?
I think you owe, the only thing you really owe to yourself is to show up as yourself. Like, I'm a goofy person. Like, I'm really silly. And, for very long, and I did stand up for 7 years, and I was a comedy writer for a number of years. After that, I continue to write comedy today. And for a very long time, I felt like I had to separate those two things. Like, if I was in a business environment, I had to be buttoned up. And if I was in a comedy environment, I had to be hilarious. And I think we put these undue pressures on ourselves to show up a certain way. That took some trial and error, but I think, maybe I like photography and horses, and we're working on, I don't know, like a project for Corona, not the virus, the beer. But it's just like, I'm going to bring that to the room. It's like the thing that I may have held kind of close to the vest for a while. I don't want anybody to know, like, I do bowling every Tuesday, but my bowling league does this. Like, you start to insert who you are into that. And that's where the me comes in. The wrong me is, I want to win, right? When I walk into this brainstorm session, I want to be the one that has the best idea. I want everybody to, and I'm guilty of that as charged. That's the one thing I check myself on a daily basis is ooh, I really like this idea, and like not being married to it. I think in the brain is kind of getting into your principles a little bit, but for me, it does start there. It starts with whether you're doing your own individual brainstorm or you're with a group. It's just a stream of consciousness. It's not there to like solve the problem right then and there. It is to go like, I'm going to throw this bucket here. Janice is going to throw in this bucket, you know, this piece over here. And then Tony and whomever else is in the room will throw in a bunch of pieces. Next, you start to see like where you can begin to connect dots. Right.
And these buckets can be family members or associates too. They don't necessarily have to be business, as you explain them. That's one of your gifts, is that you really touch things in a way, because I took some stuff from you and applied it to my personal life. And where I'm going with you on this, or where I'm wanting you to take us, deliver us to, is, you know, during COVID, that's still a conversation for the next year, right? At least during COVID, so many of us have had to figure life, you know, figure our lives and figure life, which are very different things, right? Protocols of life and meaning of life. They can associate, but they're different. Many of us have had to think about that, Chris. And I'm asking you, how do our family members apply what you teach? I know they got to get your book, and, you know, we're helping them with that, how to do that. But how do they apply your principles to life, not just as they know it or have learned it through COVID, but as they're going to advance through COVID? We are asking people to remember what you're feeling right now when you get outside without a mask. And there are all kinds of issues about CDC opening up for masks and local and regional not. People got a lot of stuff that's even contrary. As they innovate forward.
I think
help us.
A few principles. One, I think about this idea that like innovation is evolution, right? Like we want to leapfrog ourselves in some way. And that might be just, I need to figure out a better way to talk to my teenager, because I've been talking to him like this for 14 years and it's not working. So, but that's what I know how to do. And so, and where do I go to learn that new skill? Who do I talk to? Who do I ask questions? Can I be willing to challenge my own convention in the things that I think and do? I have part of my tattoo is written in Latin, and it says, change the way you look at things and the things you look at begin to change. And it's just my constant reminder of whether it's business or personal or a blend of the two, to like, what else am I missing? What else can I, oh, that person said this, I don't agree with it. Why don't I agree with it? Not because I'm right, and they're not, but because like because they're all, somebody posted on Instagram today, 2 different people looking on the floor at the number 6. One of them goes, it's a 9. Another person says it's a 6. And it's just like, we're challenging, it's your perspective. And so can I walk around that? And, maybe at one point it looks like a G, and then it looks like an ampersand. And so then you start to, I just flipped that. That was good. You should make sure you include this in the final edit. But it's like you walk around the problem and look at it from as many different angles as possible, and then make a solution. I think a lot of us feel like we have these knee-jerk reactions, and we live in this culture of immediacy where it needs to be done now. It needs to be done now. I will read an email, go like, all right, pause. I'll do that and give me like 2 days. Or longer or whatever. I think we have these knee-jerk reactions where, oh, this thing just fell on top of me, I need to figure it out right now. It's like, no, when you're in a good space, figure it out. Like, we have more bandwidth to absorb and process than we often give ourselves. And not like, I can be, you may tell me you're facing an issue, personal or otherwise. I go like, I can rattle off 10 different ways of going about it. And I might come back to you 2 weeks later. It's like, remember we were talking about that thing? Here's what you really should do. And it's just like allowing yourself that space. I'm, probably twice a year, there's a phrase or a word I have in the back of my head. I don't do it deliberately. It just shows up. And it's just like, for a while, it was pause. That was it. And not the hip hop colloquialism, but just like literally like, let me pause. Do I need to answer this right now? Do I need to fix this at this very moment?
For years, Chris, in my company, I would tell people, think about it and let's get back together on Thursday about it. And inevitably, the majority of the time, people couldn't even remember the kernel of the problem or the urgency. It got solved, they solved it, or it wasn't as big as they made it, and your pause is brilliant to tell people to be intentional about that.
Yeah, it's hard to do. It's because we are, we're, somebody told me we're what is it? We're human beings, not human doings. We're so used to the doing part of stuff. And especially like you take social media, I post a picture from a park or something like that. Somebody's like, oh, I'm here now. Where are you? And I'm like, I took that picture 4 days ago. I just now posted it. I'm not there, right? Like I try to go against the grain on most of that stuff just for the practice of it. I was like, oh, I just took this picture of a beautiful sunset. I need to post it. Now I got to think of a caption. Now I got to think of, what tags I'm going to use. Or I can just take the picture, put the phone down and sit there for another 30 minutes. And so that pause is so important. Getting up in the morning, I've developed a really rigid habit of meditating in the past year. It's like well, I brush my teeth because my breath. But when I wake up, I brush my teeth, and then I go sit for 15 minutes, guided and on my own, and it doesn't take much. That's my one non-negotiable per day.
You better be careful, Chris. You're becoming mean.
That's what I told you. That's what I've been trying to do. I just can't grow the hair.
I'll send you some.
Oh, thank you. That is funny.
Yeah. Hey, listen, Chris, I still want to stay a little bit though in this conversation about the individual and how they assess themselves for readiness for innovation. Innovation sounds very freeing. And, in our company, I shared with you, we have freedom to innovate, as the first principle, as the first core of our foundation. My brother, who served in the military in a very special way, once told me freedom isn't free. It's very deliberately paid for and has to be very carefully tended to. I see a lot of people who see innovation as really like, just try it and see what, like throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. How much of that is real in innovation, and how much innovation requires you to have something going in that you not necessarily can predict to, but that you can operate from or aspire to?
I think, look, I think humanity is made up of best guesses, right? Like it's your best guess at the moment. You have the tools and the resources to do whatever it is you need to do. That, to me, that is freeing, right? When people go like, I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, I don't have this, I don't start. And to your point of experimentation, like even in the book, there's an entire chapter written on that of just try something. It does.
That's what I wanted you to get to, Chris. Please lay in on that a little bit. And guys, please get the book. It will reward you. You're going to find ways to grow professionally, personally. You also, and I don't know if Chris is going to agree with me for saying this, but for me, it's my experience. You also get a real good comfort with being, But Chris,
I do agree. No, because that is the freedom that we seek, right? Is to completely be ourselves, which means sometimes we're not the experts. Sometimes we don't know best. Sometimes we're just figuring it out as we go. And if you can say that out loud to the people that you're trying to serve in that moment, it's like, I'm doing my best. I've thrown I did a 48-hour think tank for a bunch of government agencies. Never worked in government, as the Homeland Security, NASA, Air Force, the LA Mayor's Office. And we built this thing from scratch. I got up in the room the morning one to welcome everybody. And I was like, thanks for participating in our experiment. We don't know exactly what's going to happen out of it, but we are headed in this direction. And I think that freed me from any mismanagement of expectation. And then I was able to cut loose. And that was when the juice start flowing, right? The minute I went oh, I got to make sure this works. I got to make sure this works, and granted, like have that part of it, Eckhart Tolle talks about being at any given moment being two people, the person having the experience and the person observing the person having the experience. The part of the person having the experience is like, oh no, the person observing is like, you'll be fine. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Look down at yourself, raise yourself and look down at yourself.
And so that spirit of experimentation is like, whether you're a giant corporation or you're the head of a single family, it's just like, I'll try. I don't have to get it right every time. None of us do. So, and that's freeing, that freedom that you seek, the freedom to just like, that's what innovation is. You're doing something that no one else has ever done before, or at least that you haven't done before, right? So that is, you can't place the same level of expectation. If I've been, in accounting, crunching numbers for 30 years, sure, I get like the math has to be right and I can double and triple check it. But if I'm that same accountant and I'm like, I'm going to go on a PGA tour. All right, I've never been, this is brand new for me. And what happens is that naivete of going into like a new environment where you kind of have no business experimenting is actually what leads to the innovation. Like is actually the superpower of the moment, the doing away with construct. If I came in to talk to you about Act One, I've never run a staffing company. I may have hired a couple of people. I may have been fired myself a few times, but I'm going to look at it with this, I don't know, canvas, right? And go like, well, have you ever tried this? Like, we don't do that in this industry. Well, why not? Because I don't know, right? Like, even
that accountant taking those same numbers, as you say, those numbers have to jive, right? We only got 9 of them and a 0. But even taking those same numbers and looking at them differently, setting up formulas differently for them can move us from being end of the month observers to predictors, So I still think your formulas and your approach applies no matter where you are.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are contradictory, right? We're also creatures of habit. So we're also very comfortable in doing, what has gotten us the success. And we talk about that too. It's, we talk about, like in the book, it is about the people you surround yourself with for your problem solving efforts. A lot of times we like to ask an expert. I like to ask somebody who doesn't know, like, hey, have you ever thought about, I've never been in that situation. Well, what would you do? Right. Like, and I think, I used to when I built teams, I used to run the innovation practice for Omnicom Media Group, which is, one of the largest media agencies in the world. And our team there was, out of 10,000 employees around the world, there were 20 of us kind of focused on what's around the corner in culture, technology, trends, et cetera, et cetera. But our team was like scientists. We had a photographer. One person was a writer on the House of Cards. Another one was a professor at like Woodbury University. And another one's like a capoeira, not a master, but is like really good at it. And it's just like, I wanted people who didn't know the media business, right? Like, not as intimately as as an account director at a media agency. I wanted people to go like, well, I know this art experience has happened in downtown. What if we did something with that? Like, yes. Right, because
like Paula Madison, when she applied for her role at NBC and was told she didn't have a background in TV, she said, "What are you saying? Do you know how many hours I spend in front of one? I can get you better."
Yeah, well, you started off the conversation talking about skills, right? And most of us don't realize how transferable our skills are. Right, even that TV viewing, as rudimentary as it seems, and it's like, oh, I'm just doing this. If you're an avid TV watcher, there's somebody on my team at Mullen Lowe who's like, that's her cultural reference. This show I watched did this. And you're like, I've never seen that show, but that's a good idea. Right? Like, it's just.
Or if you're that TV mogul, you don't want them doing this unless that's volume.
Right.
You don't want them changing channels.
But even in that example, right, me changing channels only means that I'm a multi-hyphenated individial. I can watch Family Feud, I can watch My Octopus Teacher, and I can watch Queen of the South, like all in the same night.
I think back in the day, it was really innovation that allowed folks who love sports to watch 2 and 3 games at the same time on their screen, right?
The picture in picture, right? Like, or you might be watching like Dynasty and and Dukes of Hazzard. So, but no, it's just like, I think you touched on something, is just this fact that as human beings, we're not, mono-existent people. We have multiple interests and multiple kinds of things. Even when you start to talk about like, oh, the Black community reacts really well to this, or the Hispanic community, like, no, we don't. But yes, we do, right? Like you and I, we listed out all the things that we like. There's gonna be two completely different lists. There's gonna be maybe like a percentage of those things that are in common. And so,
Chris, I had a friend who was at Walmart for years, and he taught me a lot of things back in the early days with Sam Walton, growing it up. And he taught me, he said, for years, he shared how Walmart's experience in Australia brought them to their knees, because they thought Australians, they speak the same language. We have heritage countries for the settlers, so much in common that they didn't know how we were different in a good way. And that's when all the My Walmarts and Sam started to pop up, when they learned from Australia. You got to understand the local, not just bring it local, but understand local. And he shared with me, he said, I'm going to use Kool-Aid as an example. Okay.
My favorite.
Yeah. You think Black people love purple Kool-Aid because they always pick purple over orange. Really, given a choice, Black people love cherry Kool-Aid better. But if you, or they may love strawberry, or they may love blueberry, but you're thinking they love one thing because you've given them a selection of two, and in their mind they may be taking the least offensive or the better, option of a choice, but it wouldn't be optimum. And I think that's where innovation happens, is when you don't automatically assume that this community likes cherry Kool-Aid if all you're offering is orange and cherry.
I think this is such a great, so kind of back to the book, the first chapter is called Swim Like an Otter.
Yeah.
Right. The reason, and all the chapters have like these really kitschy titles deliberately, right? And this is a lesson on empathy. There's a guy named Dan Goods, who's NASA's artist in residence. He's technically, his title is visual strategist. He works with the engineering teams when they're like, oh, we want to pitch a mission to Mars. And it's like engineering language and code and space talk. And he's like, no, let's do some storytelling here. But then he also like helps redesign conference rooms, and he does these giant public art exhibitions on behalf of NASA. He said when he was in art school, he had a professor who had him draw a picture of an otter. And he drew it, whatever size it was, turned it in, and the professor goes, "This is great." He said, "Can you meet me tomorrow at the pool?" He's like, "Sure." He's like, "And bring your swimming trunks." So he said he showed up, and this is before he had a cell phone, so it was like wheeled out a little monitor, and was like, showed him a video of an otter swimming. And he's like, "Now you get in the water and swim like one." He did that for about a half hour, got out, redid the assignment, and it was 1,000 times better. Mind you, this guy is the most creative person at NASA. So we use that story to really talk about like, how deep are you willing to go to truly understand what it's like to be in that person's shoes, or that skin, or that water.
Women in healthcare say that about male practitioners all the time.
Absolutely.
Except we can't tell them to go have a baby yet.
Yeah, I like how you say yeah. That's your innovation, is male pregnancy. No, but you're absolutely right. It's or if I like it, let's say I'm not into NASCAR, but if I go to a NASCAR race because I have an inkling of an idea, oh, now there's like rubber being thrown on my face, as the cars go around the track. Oh, it takes me an hour and a half to get a beer. As from a business standpoint, now you're like, all right, there's problems and solutions that I can create. I think even as a parent, I think as parents, we very easily default to what we did and what we experienced when we grew up. And it's just not the same, right? Like there's certain principles and elements that are the same, but and I always have to like check myself again, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will begin to change, right? You like, if my daughter's on her phone and I'm like, oh, I can't, why? I'm like, oh, I was also on the phone. It was just a different kind of phone, right? Like, we forget the similarities, or we forget to honor the differences. And in honoring the differences means we have to re-educate our own selves, and that's what we kind of butt our heads up against. But if you're in the habit of being curious and figuring things out and meeting people where they are, and like these certain principles that go into innovating your life, like that's where the magic happens.
And, everything you said there is like so important. I think that even when you were talking about, like, okay, your daughter on the phone, and you were on the phone, just a different kind of phone as a kid. But at the end of the day, both of y'all needed to communicate beyond where you were seated at the moment. I think a lot of us are feeling that right now. I'm going to go back to something that I had wanted to ask you earlier, and I want you to think very carefully about it. Okay.
Okay. I'm thinking.
You ready?
Am I ever ready? Let's see what happens.
Chris, what's the funniest joke you ever heard?
Oh, the funniest joke I ever heard. They're not gonna be good. See, okay. So my dad, who just passed, notoriously like dad joke central. And I always think like I'm a big punny guy, and the other joke I'm thinking of, I probably shouldn't tell you. So no, I'm not.
Set me up. You set me up, Chris. You set me up.
Okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get everybody in trouble. So it's not the funniest joke I ever heard, but it is a thing about.
Hey, should I turn my screen off so they can't see if I laugh?
No, leave it on. You won't laugh.
Get me in trouble.
I'm probably the only person I'm getting in trouble with me. So a guy comes home, and his girlfriend is packing up all her stuff. She's crying, and she's all hysterical. He's like, "Hey, what's going on?" She's like, "I'm leaving you." And he's like, "Wait, why?" He's like, "Because you're a pedophile." And he goes, "Pedophile? That's an awfully big word for a 7-year-old." So see, it's not funny.
Go, Chris, go. Keep going. Get me there.
That's it. That's the end of the joke. Otherwise, my dad used to always say, "Why'd the monkey fall out of the tree?"
Why'd the monkey fall out of the tree?
Oh, I'm telling you. Oh, you answered. Why did the monkey fall out of the tree? I don't know. Because he was
in the tree.
Because he was dead. Why'd the other monkey fall out of the tree?
Why the other monkey fall out of the tree?
Because he was dead too. Why did the giraffe fall out of the tree?
Why did the giraffe fall out of the tree?
Because he thought he was a monkey. That's the kind of stuff I grew up with. Like, it was just, like, what? Which, funny enough that you mentioned it, because like,
have you done your dad jokes book?
Not yet. If you look at my Instagram,
you gotta do dad jokes. If
you look at my Instagram, almost every post is a pun of some sort. The caption, the hashtags, and then I do like a little, semi-serious, like, all right, here's what I'm talking about. But most of it is like, I actually started looking before the pandemic started. I found out that there's these pun competitions. And I think it was like the editor of, I want to say like Juxtapose, like some well-known magazine, won the championship last year. Like, this is like, like known individuals who participated. And I was like, I'm totally participating. There's one in San Francisco, and then they happen all across the country. And then there's like a championship bout. So that's going to be my goal for 2022.
All right. And how do you win? How do you take championship?
They give you like words or phrases, or, they give you prompts, and you have to like do some on the spot. Sometimes you have some pre-made ones. So it's just like, it's in front of a live crowd. So it's kind of based on audience response and how clever the pun was, or how cheesy it was, and whatever it was. Is it a groaner, like the groaner I just told you?
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm studying up so that I can.
Well, dad jokes certainly positioned you for it. So I don't know if it was genetic or if it was if it was nurture or nature.
I think, well, it's funny because it's like, now that you're asking me this, I feel like, you know, where I am today, I'm the product of just like obscure thinking. Like my dad would tell a joke and be like, what? Meanwhile, remember I told you I was born when my parents got divorced. So my mom didn't go to college till, till she had me. So she was 33 and then started exploring the world. So she was going, like, taking belly dancing classes and going and taking roller skating. And she would take me with her to stuff as she was just like seeing what's out there. So if you take like kind of sense of humor and this curious person, is just like, that's who I am. Like, I'll say something.
I love it. I love it. I'm grateful to them for it, as are all of your admirers. But when you talk about dad jokes, and you mentioned a little bit about your parents getting divorced, so tell us about little boy Chris.
It's really funny. So I have an 8-year-old son who, my birthday is January 6th. His is January 11th. And so like I do, like sometimes we're like, yep. That's either it's like stories my parents would tell me about me, like, oh, when you were a little boy, you didn't care who did. And I'm like, yeah, I see it. I was very independent. I was
where? Give us the location.
Well, Detroit, Michigan, 7 Mile Grand River. Redford High School was like, I don't know why I tried to raise a roof, that nobody does that anymore. But
that's okay.
But yeah, 7 Mile and Grand River, grew up there. Like it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's Detroit. So it's as great as it is. I remember like we pulled into our driveway one day and our next door neighbor had like a screwdriver to our side door trying to get in. His name was Ron.
Your neighbor, not somebody riding.
No, like
through.
Literally next door, the greenhouse next door. Like Ron, the older brother.
Detroit, cold in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, that was the thing about this. So when I moved to LA, I was, I don't know, 22, 23. And like, if you talk about gang life, it was, for me, I was just like, oh, I can identify you by your colors and your uniform you have on. I'm like, that's easy. Right. In Detroit, you just never know who was who. I've been robbed, I've been, shot at, like all these things. And it's just like, it'll somebody to look you in the face, like just like now. It'd be like if you showed up at my house after this was over and be like, give me all your stuff, because I saw that thing in the back. You're like, what? I thought we were cool. So, you grow up with that, but then you have
Chris. Okay.
It could happen. There's a rapper named Joyner Lucas. He has a video about this true story of this kid who moved to a new school, white kid, became really good friends. They would go eat at each other's friends, their parents' houses, and hung out together. The mom was like, make sure you take care of my son, and vice versa, and all this stuff. And he and the new friend ended up driving the new kid to some obscure part of town and was like, here, stand up here. And it was all part of like a gang initiation. And he shot him like multiple times with a shotgun. It's a true story. It was in the news. But he shot this great, no pun intended. The video is actually told, it's like first person camera from both of their perspectives. And it was really deep. But that's, you grow up with that, but then, like just outside of Detroit.
You're going to share that with me after this.
I will, definitely.
Yeah.
The guy's first name is Ross, and it's like an Italian last name, but I'll say it. But then, like my very first job, my first real job, I had paper routes and stuff before, and I did like neighborhood stuff, but I was a caddy. And so being a caddy at the number.
That's funny, because I was going to say, you've been running around getting shot at and robbed and all of that, and you're sitting there looking like Tiger Woods, squeaky clean.
This shirt is very reminiscent of the uniforms we'd have to wear. And imagine this is like an entire smock, or not a coverall. But I did that for like 7 or 8 years. I bought my first car caddying. I did everything from the time I was 13 till I graduated college. But the number one golf course in Michigan means you have all the business owners, all the athletes, any celebrity that came into town. So you're learning from like.
How did you hook that job?
One of my friends, Joe Milton, he had his dad was a golfer, and I think I played there or something, like, once. And recommended that he do it. And then I went and like, I would ride my bike probably 5 miles. Yeah, it was 5 miles each way. I'll ride my bike 5 miles, be there at like 5:36 in the morning, probably leave at like 4, because you would get like, if you're 14, you get $100 tip, after doing something.
Yeah, that's huge.
4 hours.
That's today. That's big today, ain't it, Chris?
Yeah, exactly. I might go back after this is over. But so I was always living this duality, of like, all right, and then eventually we moved to Southfield, which is more like suburban and so on and so forth. So then you're kind of a fish out of water, but you're learning to float in different social circles. My high school was like super diverse, from like people from the Middle East. We had a huge Jewish population, Black, white, like it was just, and I was never the guy that like got into the clique. I was cool with the groups. I was the Black kid on the swim team since I was 5 years old. So I've always been, in many cases, a fish out of water. And so like I've been comfortable in so many different environments. In fact, I almost seek that out, right? I seek out the like different types of stimuli. And I think it just gave me like this universal, vantage point on what it is to be alive, if you want to get super woo-woo about it. But it's true. It's just like these, even when I talk about like the issue of diversity in my book, right? The downside of the chapter is entitled "Put Women in Their Place," which is all about actually, literally putting them in their place. Like you need a seat at the table, and all the equality issues that we talked about. But my publisher was like, "Ooh, that might be kind of controversial." But I was like, "Look, we've all been discriminated against for something or another. If you're over 6'3" and you walk into a room, people assume you play basketball, volleyball, and for the 150th time, no, I didn't play that sport, right? Or if you've been overweight most of your life, right? Like I don't want him on the team. I want the guy. Like we've all experienced it. Now, granted, many of us have experienced higher levels of discrimination of some sort, but I had to explain that to the publisher. I was like, I wanted people to realize that they've experienced it too. But imagine if it was every day. And then when I say when I wanted people to realize that, I mean like white people. Like it was like, we're not just over here like with picket, signs for no reason. And it's like, think back to a time you felt included or shitty because of how you looked, how tall you were, where you grew up, et cetera, et cetera. You didn't have the money, all the things. And so, granted, you can navigate those things a little bit more easily, but at the end of the day, there are shared human experiences. I was at a conference in Indianapolis. This is one of my favorite conversations a couple of years ago. And I will talk to anybody about hip hop, like till the cows come home. And white guy, khaki pants, buttoned in, plaid shirt, buttoned up, the brown belt, the brown shoes. We started talking about all this stuff, and it was like right as Black Lives Matter was becoming a thing, and he started opening up. It's like he's like, I find it hard to even express that I like this stuff because I get accused of cultural appropriation and blah blah blah. And so we just started talking about like how hard it is for him, right? Like in that very ironic turn of events. And I was like, I get it, of course I get it, but it again, just kind of like democratizing that the fact that as human beings, we all have shitty experiences, and how do you then use that as a foundation for really great problem solving?
When you were growing up and you were attending that high school, how did that frame you for where you are now? We tell people you can learn from everything and everyone, even if it's what not to do. Did you learn more about what to do or what not to do through that experience? Going to Southfield. I mean, you got to write that too, going to Southfield.
Going to Southfield. Shout out to Southfield Lathrop Chargers. What to do and what not to do. I don't know. I think I just really developed that habit of exploration. I never felt like I was tied to.
But comedians have a real curiosity, right? I mean, they're always watching and learning and studying, aren't they? And you are one.
And I was, so when you little boy, like I've always been curious about humor. Like I would watch sitcoms. I remember like being like 8 or 9 years old and like editing them in my head, like, oh, that would have been funny if they said this, or what if they did that, or that was actually really funny and that was smart. or watching stand-up comedy. Like to this day, that's my favorite pastime. Like I will watch anybody's stand-up special at any given time, you know.
Do you have favorites?
Yeah, I've a ton. I'm having trouble thinking of a favorite now. Well, a couple of them got canceled. You talk about like,
oh, okay. All right. So you had to sneak them out in the dark room. Okay.
you know, like obviously, like you know, I remember I was listening to Eddie Murphy Delirious on a cassette tape, and I was probably a sophomore in high school, and I
was that the red leather suit?
Yep. Okay. Yes. And if I'm not, it's the purple one, if I'm not correct. But I borrowed the cassette tape from a white friend on the swim team, and I had it like blasted.
The white friend had it on the swim team?
Greg is his name. And I was at home, and my mom was a teacher, so I would usually get home before. She taught in Detroit, but we lived in Southfield, so I would usually get home before she did. And I was like cleaning up, doing my chores or whatever, but I had the stereo up loud. It was just blasting, you know, Eddie Murphy. And she opened the door, and we were like locked eyes right as Eddie Murphy was like, "Hey, Norton, come over here," and fill in the blank, right? Like it was a very graphic comment. Like I couldn't have planned a moment like that. And we just made this awkward eye contact. And my mom went downstairs, took the tape out, like took the magnetic tape out of the cassette tape and threw it in the trash.
Oh, wow. And Greg loved that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I had to explain to him what happened. But, you know, I've again, like that duality of, and it was probably more, I was for a long time very conflicted, you know, because I had a woman who I was raised by, who grew up in the projects and envisioned me having a briefcase and a 3-piece suit when I went to work. And I was a kid who liked jokes, and I was her youngest kid. And she's like, well, you know, so by the time I got to college, I earned an engineering degree. But the minute I got out of the house, like when I was 17 and moved to campus, I started doing stand-up comedy. So I was, again, doing both, serving both masters, if you will.
But people need funny. I mean, I don't know. This is your forte closer than it is mine. I would imagine that if you scan people who bought their own presents back in the day when we went to concerts, that you would find more diversity of interests, industry, economics at a comedy show than at a music show, even if the audiences were smaller. I'm just talking about the diversity. Something makes comedy. What makes it a joke?
Yes, it's I mean, look, I think great comedy taps into like these universal.
Was I right though, Chris, on that? Or I don't want to be right, I want to get it right.
I think it depends on where you are, right? Like you go to a black comedy club, like it's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be a black comedy club, right? But like me growing up in the Midwest, I started doing a place called Connections Comedy Club in East Lansing, Michigan, where I went to school at Michigan State University.
But Robin Williams and Eddie Murphy hit across the board, didn't they?
Yeah, well, again, like that's when you sort of transcend, right? Like if you put it in hip hop terms, it's like the difference between Drake and Pusha T. You know, Drake is kind of like he transcended the box. But if you're a real hip hop fan,
North Carolina, trust those folks back there know what they want.
Absolutely. But you go to a comedy club like Connections, there's not a lot of entertainment in that area, right? That was the only comedy. I think there were two. But so you would see a diverse comedy, a diverse crowd there because of what, sorry, I'm going to clean this up, but because of just the neighboring area, right? But Jamie Foxx talks about this, where he would like go across the country doing small venues because he was trying to find like what was the universal funny, right?
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah. And there, when you think about like dating, relationships, sleep habits, what you're starting to see now a lot more is like honesty about mental health. Things that people. Maria Bamford is really good at that. Like her whole sitcom is about her psychosis. Which is also a real life thing. Chris Gethard did the same thing about like.
So does a comedian get a license to go places that a non-comedian can't without getting canceled?
They should. I'm a big proponent of like that's the last safe space. Like don't mess with humor. I think being able to
Benny Hill can still play.
Benny Hills is like you know, certain bits people might respond to them, but then there's like, I mean, I went to a comedy show during COVID, and it's just like there's a lot of off-color comedy, right? I think it's when you read the tweet and you're like, yeah, but this person's been doing like that's their whole thing. And, you know, granted, like if there's a real offense in their personal life that comes to light, that's a whole other ballgame. But if I go like Asians do this, ha ha ha, right, and Black people do this, ha ha ha, that should be, to me, that's a level playing field. I even equate that.
There's a show called Kim's Convenience, and
Absolutely.
and they play up some stereotypes in there to the funny.
Yeah.
They're safe.
Absolutely. Well, especially if it's from those people, right? You know,
Yeah,
if
it
that
is from
creator
those
is saying like, this is my experience. Eddie Huang is a great one, right? Like the Fresh Off the Boat, like that whole storyline, you know, had it come from a different source in 2020, you know, or when the show came out, like it would have been extremely offensive. Now you had like, you go back to like your 80s movies, you know, your Porky's and I forget the movie where it's like, I mean, there's always like the over the top version of.
How about blaxploitation movies?
I'm working on one.
Yeah. See, you, I don't know if you call it straddling or whatever, because you recognize it when you recognize it, but that stuff still fine. I'm saying stuff, okay? Stuff.
You editing yourself?
Look, my mama gonna watch this. It's okay for you to cuss. I can't cuss right now. But I can. That's the weirdest thing, Chris, because I can think and cuss like deliriously, and then I gotta somewhere between here and here edit that thing and let it come out right.
Well, yeah, trust me, my home language is very different than this language.
So
I'm like, I probably shouldn't say that.
But blaxploitation, you down with
look, I think you know,
when I say blaxploitation films, which films come to mind?
Well, the first word that comes to me is empowerment. You know, it's almost like those, you know, Dolomite, right? It's a great story because Eddie Murphy just kind of, and I was like, back in my cassette tape days, I was listening to Rudy Ray Moore. I have like I have a box full of his albums in my garage.
Red Fox was a little raw before he did.
He was raw, like they all, like there was this era of just like, let's talk how we talk, right? You know, I mean, Bill Cosby, all the other stuff aside, you know, from Philly. You know, the like bad, but he just found a lane that was acceptable, like linguistically, where, you know, you take somebody like Richard Pryor is like, I grew up around pimps and hoes, and I'm just going to talk about that, and you know, being molested and all these things that he worked out on stage in front of an audience, and like even if you can learn to laugh,
and he understood also that pimps and hoes are all over the place. The ones that he grew up with were in a physical, you know, in a sexual trade, but folks can pimp and hoe all across industries in different ways, can't they?
Yeah, and
they say pimp no pimp and hoe no hoe.
Absolutely, and you know that translates to other industries, right? Like, who are you in your job right now?
Right. Who you
are you the pimp or you the hoe? Like, right, like it.
Right.
So, you know, and that's why, I mean, look, that's one of the things I love about Black culture is like, even those people that in certain communities we idolize to, you know, the guy in the hood that had the Cadillac, you're like, oh man, but how he got the Cadillac is a little suspect. But you just like you know what, Chris, it's going to go back to something I want you to talk about as well, though. And that is also the economic structure of the hood we're talking about, you know, I'm talking about, you know, Black communities on whole. We're not a monolithic people. Our experiences have been forced into monolithic type choices sometimes. And I know that I had a young lady who worked for me for a long time. I adore her. She shared, we were going to the Staples Center to my suite, and something started, they thought something was about to pop off. And they were redirecting us as we were exiting. And she said, I got you. And I'm like, what you mean you got me? You look, no, you don't know where I grew up. And all of a sudden, a whole nother person started to explain to me why the CEO was safe to go with them. Let all those execs who in that suite go there if they want to, come on, and got me to my car. Okay. And so the next day we had a conversation about that as I applauded her and thanked her
And she explained to me and her growing up, and I became interested. And another thing she shared, though, to the economic thing and the side of humor and economics and choices, she said they knew that the people running the games in their community, which were the gang leaders, they knew from church that some of the stuff they were doing was wrong, but they also were the guys who funded a lot of other people's businesses. I took care of a lot of other people's children, and they were leaders in the community. You know, they were thugs when the cops came and they needed to break up stuff, but they were leaders when the cops weren't there all the time. She said when the cops weren't there, and helping folks out of stuff. And I think that's kind of that same thing. Maybe you can verbalize it better than I can around how humor can be funny, or how black exploitation can have value. Am I in trouble here? Am I putting myself in a hole?
I agree with you. I think you have to learn to lighten your own load. You know, and if somebody tells you a joke about something, have you ever had one of those days where a ton of things go wrong, and by the time like 12th thing goes wrong, you just start cracking up? You're like, it happened to me this morning where I told you we got a puppy. I've been up all night. I was making a smoothie. The thing was spinning around. I dropped the metal spoon in there by accident. I didn't know. The blender broke. The smoothie sprayed all over the kitchen, and I started laughing. I was just like, really?
That's why God made that 4-letter cuss word, huh?
Yeah, I let one of those go, and then I was just like, this is a comedy of errors. And I think that's releasing the pressure valve. Like, good comedy really releases a pressure valve. Like, I've been thinking that, or I experienced that and it sucked too. Haha, yes, thank you for saying it out loud. Right? It exposes, again, these commonalities, right? Or you're just sitting back and you're hearing a great story. You know, you go back to Richard Pryor or George Carlin, right? Just great, smart storytellers about social constructs and things that have happened to them personally.
But
right?
Lenny Bruce broke a lot of the lines for people, regardless of what they were, right? Whether they were color, content, you know, he broke a lot of that down for folks, didn't he?
Yeah, Don Rickles, watch a comedy roast, right? Don Rickles like equally let everybody have it, you know, and it was all in the spirit of fun. There was no, and I think that's the difference where comedy or blaxploitation comes in, or like whatever you're looking at. It is, what is the intention of the person delivering it? Michael Richards on stage getting angry and yelling the N-word, he just lost his control. Right, like he was on a comedy stage, right? I'm sure people are like, oh, is this a joke, right? But and obviously in the moment, something came up in him that has just been there that we had not seen before. But you know, I've heard Patrice O'Neal, you know, like R.I.P. He just had a great documentary on his career, but like he told a joke, and I think it was like, you know, sometimes they're true stories, sometimes they're not, but like, somebody dropped a $20 bill, and him and an old Asian lady started like racing toward the $20 bill to pick it up. And he said, "I'm fat.
Wait, I need my pearls."
Wait, he was talking about how overweight he is, and she beat him to it. And he's like, instead of letting her win, he was like, "Sir, you dropped your $20, right?"
Oh no!
And so he like, it goes against everything we've learned, right? You're not supposed to steal money from people. You're not supposed to, especially, you know, you don't compete with an older person in a moment. And then he made fun of her for being Asian. Like, all those rules were broken. And I think you learn something from that, right? And I think really smart comics in 2021 and beyond will walk that line in a really smart way. There was one comic, Tom Segura, and he opened up his special before last, like, he's like, "Oh, you know what I miss we used to be able to say?" And he just started going down all this list of things, like, we used to be able to say this. And you're like, ooh. And it was nostalgic. It was fun. We realized that it didn't mean anything, again, intent-wise. I get the argument that those types of comments or jokes reinforce certain things that have real consequences. But again, that pressure valve has to be, if we don't meet something in the condition that it's in, then like, what are we going to do about it? I can't sugarcoat it, and I can't go, I think there's different ways of solving the problem, right? And I think good comedy is like such a great uniter of people.
So good comedy can be it can be the seed or even the fuel. It can be the inspiration or even the fuel for innovation, can't it?
Yeah. Or look,
if you're going to get busy innovating, you got to be prepared to laugh at stuff, right? Everybody needs a joke right now, don't we?
Well, even like Dave Chappelle recently, not recently, one of his specials, a friend of mine sent me the clip of his, and I was like, oh yeah, I totally remember that. He said, he's talking about, you know, women's equality. And he's like, you know, he said, look, if LeBron James decided he was going to be a woman and he goes to like, should he be allowed to go to the WNBA and score 800 points in a game? And then he's like, and I get the argument, women, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, or he's like, here's an idea that it's going to be controversial, or you can shut the fuck up. You know, and it was like, there, you have to know what fight you're fighting and how you're fighting it. You know, I don't think he was not doing away with the fact that women's equality is an issue. He pointed out like maybe a lane that could be, you know, I don't know, just like it's fuzzy. It's a gray area, right? And there are lots of gray areas and there are some black and white areas. And that, I guess that's why I call the show that I do for Fast Company the work in progress, because we're never done. You keep taking small bites away at the problem.
We're discovering.
And you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get it right. You know, if I interview Dan Schulman, the CEO of PayPal, and I go like, I was like, well, what did you like, if you've been CEO for this long, what did you get wrong all these other years? And he lists them out, right? Like, and that is part of the solution, is like being forthcoming with whatever's on your mind and whatever, you know, perspective that you have. I think a lot of times we're so guarded and we want to show up correctly that we don't give each other the space for error, correction, and growth. And that's a tough juxtaposition to be in.
Then you're going to have to be a little bit bold if you're going to truly innovate, or if you're going to even just experience life out loud, because we do see where we have cancel culture, and we have, you know, what that can lead to for people who economically can't afford that.
And then, but at the same time, you have to look at like the real consequences of cancel culture. Like, and certain people like absolutely deserve to be canceled. But, you know, I interviewed the president of Facebook in Germany a few years ago. And this is like right after the election and all the hacking that had happened and the fake ads and all that stuff. And I was like, we all talked about it. We all tweeted about it. We all got in our friend circles and like, Facebook is the devil. None of us deleted our Facebook accounts. Right? Like it's just so like the perception of consequence by trying something. I'm not saying Facebook tried something, but like, let's go to the Pepsi ad a few years ago with Kylie Jenner, where it's just like, oh, she tried to have everybody represented in this one big giant thing, and everybody got so up in arms. Nobody stopped buying Pepsi, and nobody stopped supporting Kylie Jenner. Right. So we have these moments that just become teachable moments. The Gucci sweater where they had like the blackface, you know, turtleneck. Nobody stopped buying Gucci, right? Like there's just
Gucci been on that road a couple of times though, and you know, I'm gonna walk out with my purse. But what happens is, in your own personal journey, you're like, don't be scared to try something for fear of it failing. Right. Because the majority of the things that we worry about don't happen. Right. Like so it's just I remain bold in that pursuit, like almost belligerently about it. Like I don't, let's just try it. We'll see what happens. Yeah, I'll take the bullet if that's the case. If if it doesn't go well, but and at the end of the day, I think if you're in a work environment, the final line of that fear of trying something is that you're going to get fired. Right, you make 3 mistakes in the wrong year, you won't have that job anymore. But guess what? You've also recovered from a whole bunch of other bad things that have happened in your life, and you're fine. So just reminding ourselves that like it's never as bad as we think it might be. To try and understand where your true currency is. Absolutely. Absolutely. I gotta ask you some questions. We gotta go to 4 for 4. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You said you're ready, so get ready. Okay, Chris. You'll enjoy this. Right? You got all 4. Okay. First question. You get to invite 4 people from any time in history to present to dinner? Who are they and why?
Shel Silverstein, Martin Luther King, Bruce Lee, and Prince.
Why each one? Why?
Sorry that they're all men. I know it's 2020. Shel Silverstein. So that's something I read to my son every night. A couple months ago, I started like singing it like it was a musical, like during bedtime. And I was like, oh, somebody should do a musical on, based on Shel Silverstein poems. And I started looking at him. I was like, I wonder if anybody ever has. I found out this dude fought in the Korean War. He used to hang out at the Playboy Mansion with Hugh Hefner. He dated a Playboy model and had a kid with her. The model died. He had a second kid later, and that kid died. He wrote Grammy Award-winning songs for a bunch of country artists that I just found like he was so expansive, and also his work does a great job. I think if you can put things like complex problems in kids' terms, then you're winning, and that's what he does well. It's like breaking down a complex issue into something that's like, I don't know, just a societal issue that is like palatable, and you go like, oh, I guess that is what that problem is. Now I understand it a little better. So that's first. Martin Luther King, only because not only because I would love to hear what he would say about where we are now. There was a great Boondocks episode where he did come back, and that was hilarious. But I think
you remember Boondocks.
I love Boondocks. I can quote it. He's like, oh, I really wish they should have asked me for my approval on that. And he was talking about like the Martin Luther King Day flyers. Did you see her party? And so, but to just like get a figure like that's, perspective on today. Prince, I don't know. I think just pure entertainment value, like a person who was unafraid to be absolutely who he is, at every moment of the day. I got to see him perform once at Coachella. And I was like, man, this is great. But just like his musicality, his story.
Were you in one of the raw tents, or you were a little better at Coachella?
I had like on this particular stage, I was pretty close up. I was like a few rows back because before him it was Morris Day. So it was like Morris Day, and I was like, okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh. At Coachella, it was just like, it was, and I don't even think I knew he was performing that year. I think I was like, what? And I like bolted. Who's the fourth one that I said? I forget. Shel, Martin. Bruce Lee. I've been a martial artist since I was 17. And I even on my Instagram profile, I say I'm a martial arts snob. Like, I'm not into the MMA stuff. Like, I appreciate it for sport, but for like the arts and the martial and the philosophical practice and the confidence you get. And I competed for years, and I'm taking wushu right now, not at this very moment, but tomorrow.
Okay.
I've been learning, it's around here somewhere. I've been learning like a sword, but just like the spiritual philosophy that goes into martial arts is amazing. I think it wasn't like Bruce was just strong and really good at, like he was a conflicted individual who still understood the wisdom of life and was the absolute best at his craft. And, now that he's passed, you get or now that we have YouTube, you get a lot of like these like bubblings up of like things he would say or feats he would do and so on and so forth. And, I don't think you have, and every time it has its individual, but you don't have all that wrapped into one person that I can think of, that's a public figure. He's not even allowed to be flawed. Like, he was, a jerk to his family, right? Like he did drugs. He had a mistress. Like he was flawed, but we still saw him for his value. And I think that's just such an important, in talking about cancel culture. It's like, I hope when I die, nobody brings up all the terrible things I did, because he also did X, Y, and Z. Like,
don't say it, Chris.
Yeah, no. He told this terrible joke to Janice, Bryant, Howroyd on the show. And that'll be the thing. That'll be
in the middle of an Asian issue
right.
in our our
So,
society.
exactly. That'll be the one thing I'm remembered for is like that 15 seconds it took me to tell that terrible joke earlier. So so anyway, I just like those are four people that speak to me, you know, personally, at least off the top of my head.
That's four. That's one for four. Let's go two for four. Books. What four books would you recommend to our family? You know who we are. What four books would you recommend to folks? And I already recommended yours, so you don't have to put that on it.
I have yours. Right there. See? That's never too far away. Winning in business and life. I think that's who doesn't want to do that? Like, I think that's one. So so now I got three to go. So A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. You know, when people confuse the quote and they think it was Mandela who said, you know, it's not our greatest fear that we're inadequate, is that we're powerful beyond measure. That like there's a whole stanza in her book, and like I read that book at a very, I don't know, a troubling time like in my own life. And it wasn't, nothing was happening to me. It was just like, where am I supposed to be right now? And who am I?
You were in here. You were in here.
Absolutely.
Moving stuff around.
And so that was at the right time. There's a book I'm reading right now by a guy named David Goggins, who is called Can't Hurt Me. And he was 300 pounds plus before he decided he wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And he talks about this journey, like even how he grew up in an abusive household and his family, like all the things that he's overcome. And it's just like, you know, again, the kindergarten reminders, like there's always somebody else who had it worse, you know, than you did. But also to turn that into like real mechanics of how you can increase your own potential, regardless of what domain you operate in. I think is really powerful. And then The Four Agreements is another one that comes to mind. The Four Agreements is such a simple read. That is like a book you can probably read a chapter a day every day, and there's only 4 to read. Like you can do that over and over again for a month, which is exactly what I did, right? I was just
like my as a person thinketh, right?
Yeah, and it's just like, you know, regardless of how conscious we are of it or not, it's like we all grow up with input. That we all just have input and influence, whether it, you know, we realize it seeps in or we don't believe it does. It does. And so how do you recognize those things and undo them? And there's like these agreements that we made with the world and society and ourselves that we, you know, we're like, oh wait, I didn't actually agree to this. It's just a learned way of being. And so now what do you do once you know, like one of my favorite constructs is like, you can't unlearn something. So once that thing is there and that knowledge is in your head, it's not going away. It is, but it's the practice, right? And so anyway, I like it, but I'm a lazy reader. So I like things, and that's even how I wrote my book. I was just like, if I want to read this how I would read it, you know, so yeah. So like I wanted to make it easy that you didn't have to read page 40 to understand what's on page 127. So and it's really simple. It's a simple book.
So you really were the prototype for the millennial.
Yes, I feel like I'm Gen X, but I'm like very millennial behaviorally.
That prototype.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 2 for 4. Let's go 3 for 4. What are you listening to and why?
So in heavy rotation right now, because it just came out on Friday, is J. Cole's album.
Yeah, I told you you're a mini me. You're a mini me. So love J. Cole. Don't hurt that he from North Carolina.
When you said that earlier, it's like that's immediately where my mind went. But that dude, man, you know, I appreciated J. Cole, like just, you know, as a person observing the industry and like going to shows and like loving music. I was never really a fan, and I felt like this time I was like, I'm a fan. Like I just went over the hump. And then, you know, cut to 2 days later, he plays in his first professional basketball game in Rwanda. He's on a basketball team in Rwanda. And I'm like, wait, what? So now he just even upped that, right? I appreciated him lyrically and musically.
I told you people from my neighborhood, from North Carolina.
Oh man,
when I say we know who we are, we know what we like. And my sister Zess would tell you, Chris, and we big and bold about it. Go on, Chris.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think also he was very like raw and honest in a lot of it. Just like, I think a lot in hip hop, you had like this bravado and I'll shoot you if you do X, Y, and Z, which, I think that's almost like the genius in hip hop music is the poetry, the fact that you and I can say the same thing 1,000 times over and say it different every time in a different poetry, in a different way of saying it. Even just talking about girls or chains or whatever, it's just like that. The magic is in the manipulation of language. And like, ooh, how did you put that? He actually said he got in trouble. He was trending on Twitter. I know I'm going all off topic now, but he was trending on Twitter for a freestyle that he had done. And he said, he was talking about how the industry slept on him for a while. And then his next line was, Bill Cosby, if they sleeping, then boop, then F them, right? And I was like, that, ooh, it was bold, but it was a great line. So anyway.
But you know what, you're so right there. And I mean, my own son, very young, reminded me, you know, my husband's British, right? Over my shoulder, Angel over my shoulder. And on one of our family trips, he was sharing with me, Brett, when we went to Stratford-on-Avon, he said, Mom, you guys he was very young. He said, you guys get so excited about Shakespeare, but he was a thug writer of his time,
Oh, I will tell you one of my favorite projects, probably in the last 10 years, the Smithsonian partnered with a bunch of artists, right? And they were like, basically they created this generator. You could play the song. They had Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, Drake. It was probably like 10 artists, Missy Elliott. It was probably like 10 artists that they had, and probably like 2 or 3 songs from each of them. As you played the song, it would show you images. So like when Frank Ocean was singing on with Jay-Z, and he's like, what's a god to a king? What's a king? And they were showing like these images of art from the Smithsonian's library. And so it's just like, these are age-old constructs, the pursuit of money and power and wealth and sex and like all the things. It's not like some thug stuff from Brooklyn. It is just like the pursuit of mankind for centuries. And so if you can put art next to art and go like, they're talking about the same thing. That was one of my, hands down, one of my favorite things. Who else is in rotation? My taste is weird outside of that. St. John. St. John is an artist, like if you've ever heard Roses, that's actually like a very slow, almost like ballad, like, bassy. But I discovered it when my dad got sick. I went home and I rented the car that was outside my tax bracket. And and then I had the album playing because I just like, let me listen to this Roses guy. Like I had it on rotation the whole week I was there. It's all I was listening to. I think he's just a genius writer. He's like an incredible writer. As is SZA. SZA is like the way she can say like, I'm hurt, but I don't need you, in the same sentence, in the same words. And you're like there's a power to that. And then who else? I'm gonna go like Glass Animals. Like that it starts to get a little like alternative from there.
Yeah.
Jungle is another one. I just discovered Jungle in this whole thing. But that's actually, I bought tickets to see Jungle in October. So I'm hoping everything's fine by then.
See, I'm building my playlist from my guests.
Oh, I'll send you some stuff. Like I will.
Awesome.
Oh, here's a fun fact. I just became a Spotify influencer.
Oh, cool.
So on my new website, there's a whole Spotify page which has some pre-selected playlists that I've created. So you can start there. I sent you that link.
Hey, asking all the family. Thank you. 3 for 4, you going strong. 4 for 4, you get to go hug your new baby.
All right.
The best advice you've ever received, from who, and why is it relevant now to share with others? Now, if you have your own advice you want to give, fine, give that after. But we're talking about advice you've received. 4 pieces of advice you've received, why it's important now, and who shared it with you, if you can. If you can't,
Yeah.
you can anonymize it.
Well, the first one that comes to mind, I have not implemented yet, but I like it. There's a woman named Rochelle Parham, who like she was the first CMO of eBay. So she catapulted them into superstardom of a platform that they are now. She just got she's a lot of things. An investor. She just is launching a group at Universal right now, and their first e-commerce group. But when I interviewed her, she said that she has her personal advisory board. And there's a group of friends that, people that know her, they're not business oriented. They're like family members, friends that she goes to on a regular basis, sometimes all at once, sometimes individual, and just gets feedback, on a thing she might be facing or whatever. And I think a lot of times when we think about mentorship, we think about like a professional that we can ask who's really good at their craft, right? And this mentorship for her comes from this council of people that know her intimately, which probably is even more valuable, or you have those two things sitting next to one another. So that,
and there's no fear of getting you straight.
Right. And matter of fact, our whole conversation, like, the thesis I walked away with that was the feedback loop, not being afraid to accept and or give like, honest feedback. So that's one. I think my mom taught fashion design for a very long time. And she didn't necessarily phrase this, but she reinforced this idea that like how trends come and go. Like when everybody's buying cross colors, and I was like, I want some cross colors. She was like, no, she's like classics. Get you some basics, get you some classics. And to me, that just kind of speaks to this idea of timelessness. So whether it's the things I create or the things that I work on, I try not to like they're founded in the times that we're in or the issues at hand. But I want to create a long-standing solution to that, and I'm not realizing like the poetry connection until you just asked me that.
Did your mom like the movie Mahogany?
Yeah, she did. Yes, she did. She did. Yep. Yeah. She, growing up in the project in Detroit, like I was just telling my son this because we were listening to Little Shop of Horrors, the soundtrack, and Levi Stubbs was Audrey too. Like he was the voice of the plane. And I was like, it's like, oh, who did that voice? He did such a great job. I was telling both kids, and I was like, that is one of the guys from Temptations. She's like, wait, and I was like, yeah. And then I went on to tell them that they were at my parents' wedding. Mind you, this is like, again, 18 years old in the projects of Detroit, growing up with like Diana Ross was my mom's childhood best friend and like all these things. So, again, I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but
he was the 4 tops because somebody gonna correct you.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's not here to defend himself.
Somebody gonna correct you. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, you just corrected me. You are
so no need to call Chris about that out, okay?
Exactly. I think, I don't know. I mean, the quote that I told you earlier, like that, I learned that from Wayne Dyer, which was change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will begin changing. That just honestly became a guidepost for everything I do. But it's just like, let me pause, look at it again, come back to it. And, oh, here's what I missed, or whatever it might be. And then fourth, I don't know. This is nobody gave it to me, but it's like, be yourself. It is age. I think it speaks to the Black experience, right? Like, because we feel like we need to show up certain ways in certain environments and other ways in other environments. And, I talk a lot about the fact that I've had and do have imposter syndrome and a lot of places and things that like I get involved in and social circles I find myself in. And I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. At the end of the day, if I'm the guy that makes the joke that the circle breaks up at the party, like that's okay. Like, and that's a real occurrence. But I got invited back to the next one. It's like I'm going to honor who I am, even in a moment. Like I might change. Sometimes I might be the life of the party. Sometimes I might be like laying in the cut, leaning against the wall, not having a conversation with anyone. And and that could be Tuesday and then Thursday, and like, well, just yesterday you was all jokey, and it's like, this is how I'm feeling right now. you
Or
know?
tomorrow it might be forget the party.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's being yourself. Like we are many selves, right?
Mhm.
We're not the
Mhm.
same person all the time, every time. And I think,
Chris, do you ever find yourself apologizing for the same kind of thing over and over and feeling a betrayal to yourself when you do it when you were growing up? I know you're evolved a little stronger than that now, but I mean, is that too raw to talk about?
no, I mean, if I'd say there's a childhood, or adolescent regret, it's probably not speaking up enough, right? Or not like listening to myself. And I think maybe that's just like, that comes with the territory of being whatever, 15, 16. Like, again, the fact that my mom was kind of pushing this lawyer doctor thing on me,
Yeah.
but I really like jokes. It's like, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know to do anything about either of them. Right. So, but I think I probably would have tuned in a little bit more. Um, I was telling one of my kids this recently, is like, my mom I remember she had like a really bad breakup, and she was in her room crying, and I never
Mhm.
went in the room. Like and to the point where she came out and she was like, I'm in here crying, and you don't hear me. And I was like, part of me is like, I don't know what to do. But sometimes, but no, the idea of like being present is enough. Hey, you okay? Do you want some water? Like, just, I don't have to fix it. And I think that's also, we grow up with this, at least, not to get into the male female divides, but it's like men are fixers and problem solvers. And if you've ever been in any kind of relationship counseling, it's just like, all right, you want to do and fix the problem. And sometimes I just need you to be here. Like, I don't need it to be fixed. I just need your presence.
Teenagers tell us that often. When
Yes.
I'm sharing with you, please don't try to fix it. Just listen.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And that, so, just talk about the phrase that I keep in the back of my head when it used to be pause. Now it's meet them where they are. I'm going to meet you where you are. I don't like,
Yeah.
and if you need something from me, I'm here, you can say that. If that need is just like, I'm on the phone listening, that's that's good too. If you want some advice or you want a resource, I can give you a phone, like whatever it is. And so, like, I'm so used to throwing out ideas at people, whether they want them or not. I'm just like, oh, really? No, that's not.
I love it. And I know you're true to form, because it was quite a gift to meet you all those years ago at South by Southwest. Remember when we could actually go there?
Yes. Oh, that was,
Yeah.
yeah. I tell people all the time, it was like one of my favorite moments. Thank you to Nathan for like having the wherewithal to connect us. But I was just like, oh, we could have stayed there and talked like that first time, like,
Yeah.
for days. And
Yeah.
so, but days have turned into years, and we've had multiple conversations. So
And I am so grateful for this one. Wow. I didn't get through half of the things I wanted to ask you, but I got more than I imagined I could have. And I know our family is like richly enjoying this. We're going to have to connect again. Right now, all I can do is just send you a lot of love from my heart to your home.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Thanks so much. So, what anything you want to part this out on, before the music goes boom, boom, boom?
I don't know. I'm exhausted. Don't get a puppy. That's
Right?
exactly. No, it's not that bad. It's fine. Again, it's change the way you look at things, and the things you look at, it's like, oh, it's still cute. I go like immediately to the cuteness. I'm like, all right, you're cute and you're learning. That's all I could do. I can't be.
Well, Chris, you also cute and you're teaching. So thank you, boo. Thank you, boo. Thank you. And look, you survived 4 for 4.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't know if you can see the beads of sweat, but it doesn't matter as long as I survived.
I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay well, and let's see each other soon. We're coming out of this.
Let's do it.